And there we have it. Hey, hello, and welcome back. It's me, Bill, and Dave here. So I'm Bill Patton, the author of The Art of Coaching High School Tennis. And we have,
Dave Smith, the author of Tennis Mastery, Coaching Mastery, and High School Coaching Mastery, among others.
okay, awesome. And so we're going to cover two topics today. And I don't think we're going to go incredibly deeply on the first one, but um, the first topic that we're going to cover is how to coach unique personalities, because one of the great sports coaching quotes of all time was from John Wooden, where he says, "I coach everybody the same, differently." So anyway, we're going to unpack that, and then Dave is going to go and discuss how he teaches every player to use a Continental grip. And we know that as soon as you say Continental grip to everyone, that there's somebody in the audience who's going to say that's impossible, right? So and
Yep.
and then not only that, and then I think also we're going to kind of go a little deeper on that one, because there are some things to understand about that process. And I think the other thing that we'll unpack is sort of how to get rid of the dogma behind Continental grips, because some people get way too carried away. All right, so the first thing is, um, you know, every team that you coach is going to have a unique personality. So you have the culture of your school, and that determines a lot about how your teams are going to be. But it's really interesting how a couple of kids graduate, a couple of new kids come on as freshmen, and the team's just way different. So Dave, where do you want to start with that? The difference in the personalities of the teams.
Well, you're absolutely right. In fact, I always tell pros all the time, the first thing you should do if you want to be a great pro is to coach high school tennis for a few years, because there's no better learning environment for a coach than to expose themselves to a large group of diverse personalities. And to piggyback on what you said about John Wooden, which I agree 100%, and that is, I teach every single player exactly the same. I call it the advanced foundation, as I mentioned in all my books. But the idea is that we teach the same patterns of development: stroke, grip, drills, etc. But coaches have to understand, which this is a great topic, that every boy or every girl, the ones behind me, all have a different personality. Every one of them. They're not all going to be demure and reticent to your advice, and some are going to be very coachable. Others are not. And so one of the things as a great coach is that you anticipate that. And before we get into individual diversities, I will say that if you want to protect yourself to create as best of an environment, you better darn well have a very clear indication of what you want your players to do, achieve, how you're going to achieve it, what the ramifications are of anything that they may bend a rule. If you're not clear, then they are going to take advantage of you as a coach. They're going to create the conflict in your team, because why does that girl get to do that and that girl doesn't get to do that, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'll leave it at that, because
Yeah.
I average 50 girls a team, 40 boys a team, and that's I can't even put my finger on one unique one, because they were all unique. So that is the
Yeah.
first thing I recommend. Make sure you have clarity in your organization, communication, and your program expectations, and all the things that go into that.
Yeah, and I just realized I need to turn my light on. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's great. And so from that, while you were thinking, while you were talking, it made me think. And you're going to hear some things in the background, because my cat is really wild right now. So he's going to be scratching stuff and playing with toys. So if you hear stuff in the background, it's because Corky's on the loose. But anyway, no, it's really important not to play favorites. So you're going to have kids that you like, more than the other kids. So, but having the determination to give them as much of an equal amount of attention, and that put the same amount of effort to get to know them, and how that works out for them. And also realize this: no matter how good and how fair you are, there's going to be someone who thinks you're not.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's
it's
a
like,
very true
yeah,
statement.
no matter how equal you try to make everything, someone's gonna accuse you of playing favorites, at some point, or they're gonna be thinking about it. So just get over that. Just go, okay, all right, that's what happens. It's just the way it goes. But um, but like I had this team that was one of my favorite teams ever, and these kids were funny. They were just hilarious, and a lot of them watched the same comedy shows on TV, and they watched late night talk shows, which maybe they should have been, studying or been in sleep. But so we had all this, regurgitated humor on the team. And, a couple of them were particularly funny, but then sometimes other teams didn't take that so well. So they thought sometimes, we're winning, and we're winning big, and we're laughing over on the sideline, and they think we're laughing at them. And I'm like, so, I would go up to the coach and I'm like, wait, hey, no, I understand how it looks and how it feels. And trust me, I've been working really hard to get these guys to calm down. And I guarantee you, it has nothing to do with your team or your players. These guys are just goofy, right? And then I would go, hey guys, can you just keep it in a little bit? Just don't laugh out loud. So, and on that team, we had a kid named Joel. And it's funny because before Joel showed up, we had a problem with confidence. But Joel was so confident, to the point of being almost overconfident. Adding him to that team brought up the confidence of the whole team. And then the whole team sort of collectively knocked him down a notch. And then here the funny thing is, I always thought he was going to really amount to something big. And he is actually the CEO of one of the most amazing photography apps that you can download for your phone. I'm not going to name it, right? But he is doing quite well, and has really changed the way photography is done with mobile devices. So it's kind of cool. And I always knew he was going somewhere, but he added a certain element to our team. But we also needed to sort of help him regulate his ego to some extent. So, yeah, what a great trend. And he was probably the reason why we had our first undefeated season.
Nice. Well, I think that every coach has to realize two things. One, you can definitely take advantage of your team's personality, strengths, and or weaknesses in terms of how to quantify the teams rising up, as you just gave a great example of one kid doing that. And I've had those same exact situations where I've had a player really change the dynamic and the culture of the team, usually favorably, although there's always a couple that kind of go negatively. And there again goes back to my statement of making sure you're clear on expectations, respecting opponents, things like that, to make sure you minimize the perception that your team is doing something that, because let's face it, if instead of winning a match and you guys all laughing, I'll bet if you were losing the match badly, although I could be wrong, but I would bet they wouldn't be quite as jovial if they weren't winning. But that's
no, I think they would have been laughing more.
Well, it could be. Yeah, you never know. But I'll add kind of a different take on this, because you can, with 50 girls on a team, you'll have 50 girls, 40 of them are going to be on the lower JV squad. Not 7 make varsity and then the rest are JV. And I never assume that even the weakest of those players is not capable of becoming a highly skilled player. I always encourage it. Nice cat, love the kitty. And I want to say that, I've had so many examples of some I've talked about in the past where a player started as the worst player on my team in California, in Southern Cal, who became the number one doubles player in Southern California after being the worst player on my team. And he did it in 1 year. I had a girl on my girls team freshman year, number 27, middle of the pack, nothing fancy. By her sophomore year, number 2 player in the state. So again, never assume, but again, that is, you can make that expectation, because we train all of our players, as we talked about at the start of this podcast. We train all of our players with the advanced foundation that every one of them is going to develop into a great player. And it's all predicated on their desire, their determination, their drive, their discipline, their dedication, all the things that maximize their potential or define their potential. Athleticism, which is the least important. I've had too many kids that couldn't even hit a ball, become highly ranked players. So personality is one thing. Player potential is a whole nother ball game that I like to use, because that's going to define the depth of my team over the course of the career of my coaching on that team. That's why this particular team behind me, we never lost a match in 5 years, and in California, we never lost a match in 12.
Yeah.
So that's how we do it, and it kind of leads into the next topic that we'll talk about here in a minute, about how do we, if the Continental grip is the agreed upon grip among top players when we're talking about serve, volley,
Yeah. Let's hold off
overhead.
on that for a little
Sure.
bit, but
Yep.
yeah.
But anyway, I wanted to throw that out there too.
Yeah, so I want to shift gears because every once in a while you're going to get an Eeyore on your team.
That's a great.
Yeah, you will have Eeyore at some point, and you might have an Eeyore every season of your career, or it might skip a couple. But in all the teams that I've had, I've almost always had this Eeyore kid. So you put the kids out on a drill to do something, and they're not quite used to the drill, and it's not looking really good. And then the kid makes one attempt, and they don't even put even close to 100% effort into it. And then they go, see, it doesn't work. Right.
Absolutely.
And so this will happen. I mean, it's guaranteed. This will happen at some point to you in your high school tennis coaching career. And so I have a canned line, and you can steal this. You can make it your own, change it however you want. Because I will say this. I will say, Kyle, drills don't work. People do. So yeah, you just exposed the fact that the drill is not going to do itself. Right. So anyway, so then, you kind of have to stay on that kid, that one kid who will be, and they'll often be consistently negative about what you're trying to do. So if you can get them to show improvement in front of everybody, and then you can prove that to them, then you can win that kid over. But it might be that you need to remove that kid from the drill, put somebody else in, and let people see someone else succeeding at it, so that they can realize that it really is something that works. So, but yeah, that's a really interesting thing. And those kids aren't altogether bad. I really appreciate kids who have the bravery to be honest about how they're feeling. Because if there's one kid that's vocalizing it, there are probably 4 or 5 or maybe even 10 other kids that are thinking it.
Right.
So it gives you a chance to address that. So, try not to be mean to that kid, but, listen to them and say, okay, I understand what you're thinking, but now I'm going to show you why it's actually possible, and we're going to do it.
Yeah, the objectivity, I'm going to add to that, because this is an important concept, because you're going to get kids that are going to resist learning proper technique, proper grips, proper strokes, proper footwork, whatever. And they're going to be relatively successful in utilizing flawed flawed. There's 100 ways to hit a tennis ball over the net. Most of them do not allow a player to progress to higher levels. And so I always do one thing that's kind of fun, and that is a player might be using, say, an Eastern grip on their serve or whatever, and they say, look, I got it in. I said, well, yeah, okay. Then I turn my racket upside down, and I'll hit the ball with the grip of my racket, not the face, but the grip, and I'll hit the ball over the net because I can hit the handle pretty easily with just a little tap and get it into the box, usually within 1 or 2 times. I say, look, I got it in. So does that make this technique a technique I should be teaching you? And of course, they all say, well, of course not. And I said, well, there you go. You're using an Eastern grip that most beginners use and are comfortable with, but you won't see a top college, a top high school, and a top pro using that grip. So anytime you're trying to convey a better way, talking about it objectively, going, okay, this is why this grip will allow better spin, correct axis of spin, greater racket head speed, blah, blah, blah. You now will convince them, hopefully, to understand that, A, it's not going to happen overnight. I always use the analogy of a piano player. And that is, would I teach a piano player to use 2 index fingers to play the piano? And of course, every kid would say, no, that you'd only be able to play chopsticks for 20 years. And I said, there you go. And if you're using the Eastern grip on your volley and you're trying to reverse grip and do Eastern forehand, Eastern backhand, you can hit volleys, and you're playing against low-level players who hit slow. You'll be okay. But then as you get better, you're going to play better people who hit the ball lower, faster, dipping shots. Yeah. Those grips will not work. They will not allow you to defend more or hit more effective shots more consistently. And so once you can get them to understand it's not going to happen overnight, and we'll talk a little bit about how I train all my players from 8-year-olds on the way up to adults who've never used the correct grip, how I'm very successful in creating that opportunity for every player to master the grip, to allow them to now go, wow, I can now hit a kick serve or a slice serve or hit low volleys off my ankles and hit them effectively, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think it's good. I think we're making a good transition on the technique thing because there is a connection between, unique personalities and the way that they're going to learn technique. And you're going to have outliers. You're going to have kids way over here who are super talented, and you show them one time and they're doing it. And then you have another kid who's maybe a little slower on the uptake, but as with time on task, they're going to get it in time. And then you have other kids who, because of a developmental issue or a really unusual way that their arm and their hand and their musculature is developed, they're just not capable. So you have to adapt. So I'll give 3 very quick vignettes. All right. So I had this one kid who was in the U.S. Olympic soccer development training program, and he just came out during the summer one time to screw around with his buddies to play tennis. And so I showed him how to hit a kick serve. And normally, and I'm very determined about getting all of my doubles players to be hitting kick serves and to serve and volley some. All right. So, but I'm expecting it's going to take weeks. So he learns it in about 30 minutes. And then I said to him, hey, you know what? Tomorrow, don't try to hit it too much because I don't want you to double fault in your match. Right. And he kind of looked at me funny, like, why are you saying that? And then the next day, he was competent at hitting kick serves and he won his match and he had very few double faults. And I was like, wow, and that's rare, but, with most kids, it's going to take them a little time to gain some mastery. But I also had this one girl who she just could not hold a Continental grip. And if she did it, there was something about the way her arm worked, the muscles fired differently, and that ball just went all over the place. So as it turned out, she actually served way better using an Eastern forehand grip than anything else. I mean, she's probably never going to be more than a high JV, low varsity doubles player with that. But what am I going to do? Have her hit a serve where she's only making 1 out of 10, right? Or, doing what she can do within the scope of her talent level. So, there is a fine line, and she is very much an outlier, like a 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 player, so I don't know if you can hear my cat. He likes to crawl along the bottom of the couch. Can you hear it?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. He's in a wild mood right now. All right.
Well,
so,
let me go to your statement, because that's a great example of what typically young players, girls, a lot of girls who have never even thrown a football because they don't know how to integrate the arm internal rotation of the forearm kind of movement. But the thing that you have to understand is, if they can get it in once, they can get it in twice, they can get it in 10 times, they can do it. And here's the deal. You change their perception, because a lot of times a coach will tell a player, okay, use a continental grip. They hit a lot of slice. The ball doesn't even get to the net, and the ball's curving so far to the left. Because one of the things I always get mad at pros when they're teaching the serve, I hear a lot of pros go, well, we're going to teach them an Eastern forehand grip, but we'll change her later or change him later. And the problem is, it's not just a grip change. Everything has to change if you're going to change the grip. So if you're going from an Eastern forehand, you tend to be facing the net. You tend to be, your hips tend to be open. You tend to have your elbow forward, your hand forward, palm forward, and you're pushing the ball basically to the target rather than brushing from left to right if you're a right-handed player. And so I have a very young seventh grade girl, is very tiny, and she came out first time a month ago hitting. We trained the continental grip, slicing the ball, not getting to the net, curving. She's actually, brushing the ball the way we want, but there's just no depth to it. And I'm like, that's perfect. That's perfect. Now I want you to aim over the fence, the back fence. I want you to hit it that high. And all of a sudden she started hitting it on a trajectory that matched the spin. So many players hit flat, and now they try to hit slice. And back to my statement, that it's not just a grip change. It's now a body position change, a swing path change, an aiming point change. And the thing about the slice serve or the hybrid serve or even a kick serve, it's not a strength issue. It is a technique issue. When my daughter was 8 years old, within 2-3 months, she was hitting a kick serve with a full-size racket and regular yellow ball and getting it in. Again, and she was tiny. I mean, my daughter is very small. And so I usually tell players, in fact, one of the drills we do is we do one-fingered volleys on our toss and block drill, just to get them to feel what it's like to hold the racket literally with 2 fingers, or thumb and index finger usually. And they reflect the ball, because that forces them not to swing, because if they swing, they're going to lose the racket in their hand. So it's a great way to teach the volley, but it's also a great way to teach the serve. So we teach the serve, just hold it with 3 fingers and just do your pattern and aim. You may have to tell them to aim over on the parking lot, over the fence. And then they start going, oh, now I understand where I need to aim to integrate that grip and that serve. And again, I agree with you, Bill, that sometimes you'll get a player that seemingly won't be competent in utilizing the continental grip. And so going to the Eastern forehand grip is certainly a Band-Aid in terms of giving them success. And it may give her success for the moment or even for a season. But like you said, they won't usually progress beyond that. Although I've seen a couple players with an Eastern forehand grip hit a pretty good serve. I mean, everybody said Boris Becker hit with an Eastern forehand grip, which he never did.
Let me interject for a second, because you said something really good that requires a little bit more background. All right, so this was a kid that I was teaching privately, and her high school season was coming up very shortly. Right. So, and I know that her coaches are not great at teaching technique, and they will probably counter what I'm teaching. So that makes it a more specific thing. If she's on my team and I'm part of her long-term development as my player, I probably take a slightly different approach. But yeah, it is interesting. And, another example would be a kid that I had who had, like, what I call a backhand that looked like he was starting an upside down lawnmower. So his
Yep.
backhand looked
All
like
in
this.
hand.
And we, right at the beginning of the season, we took 2 weeks to try to straighten that out and see if we could get him to drive it and hit some topspin. But all it did was wreck his confidence. So I just left it alone, and he made good use of his very strange backhand. But sometimes you have to look at what's the, if this is somebody who needs to be able to compete and have confidence in something that's not the greatest, that's better than having them go through a real crisis of confidence and have to go through that for the entire season. So anyway, so how about let's shift into the nuts and bolts of how you teach the Continental grip, and like walk us through step by step, and what are some of the challenges that kids need to get through along the way? I think you've already touched on that some.
Yeah, well, the bottom line is every kid is capable, every adult is capable. Whether the problem with a lot of coaches is they keep telling the kid what to do, but they don't give them the drills and the exercises per se that allow them to master it. So they're just spinning their wheels, because if you don't train the player within the context of what it takes to master something, they won't master it. They simply won't. You can't. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. Well, if you're teaching, you keep telling them to use a Continental grip and they keep changing their grip because you're not giving them the tool to master it. Good luck. You ain't going to get them to change, most likely. So every one of our players spends every day during our warm-up doing our up bounces and down bounces, which is up bounces, which is a Continental grip, shoulder or a chest high, racket at a 90-degree angle to their forearm, and they're doing their up bounces with a Continental grip. And we always show them how to find it, how they can double check it, spreading their fingers out, making sure they're not holding a death grip or a caveman grip on the racket.
How do you show them how to find their Continental grip?
I don't use the knuckles. I wish I had a racket. I'm in my office. Everything's in my car. So we use the back of the hand. And if you're holding a Continental grip with your arm straight out like this, the back of your hand in a Continental will be pointed towards the top of their head. If they're holding an Eastern, I wish I could show this a little better. If they're holding an Eastern, the back of their hand will be straight up to the sky. So a Continental grip looks like that. Eastern looks like that. Eastern backhand would be even further, and the back of their hand would be tilted towards their chin. So instead of using the knuckles, because I found many players have knuckles kind of in different orientations, they're not exactly similar, but the back of the hand is flat for everybody. And so we use the back of the hand tilted towards the top of their head. So that's how and then we keep the elbow straight. We don't want that elbow bent. If you want, I've taught 4,800 players. I've never had a kid with tennis elbow ever. Now, the reason for that is the only way you get tennis elbow is if you bend the elbow and you straighten it at contact, putting all that strain on that lateral epicondyle. And that's how you get tennis elbow. Server's elbow, of course, is medial, and that comes from this action. And server's elbow can be, even pros can get server's elbows. We also call it golfer's elbow, because that's a common issue with that internal medial side. But that is part of the training, because we teach the lever of the backhand volley. The longer the lever, the more power. I use the analogy, would you want a short crowbar or a long crowbar to lift a heavy car? Well, of course you want a longer crowbar. Well, the backhand volley is hit with a longer crowbar. If I bend the elbow, now I'm hitting from a shorter position. And I'm not only that, it makes me take my racket back too far. So if my elbow's straight, now my arm's only here. If I bend the elbow, now my racket's further back by my left shoulder.
Yeah. So let me run something past you.
Sure.
So what I've been doing is having kids put their index finger and their thumb on the strings, and then
sliding it down,
and then sliding it down to find their Continental grip. Yeah,
you remember the old days where you put your palm on the racket and bring it down that way. But
that's for Eastern.
Yeah, that definitely goes to Eastern. But I like that.
But yeah, fingertip and thumb, and then slide down. Yeah. So then you go and you do up bounces both ways.
Well, we first do ups. We do 100 ups.
Yeah.
Then we kneel down on our right knee if we're right-handed, and we do 100 downs. Now, why do we kneel? Because if you do down bounces standing up, you're going to migrate towards the Eastern forehand grip just because of the angle of the racket. So by kneeling down, you can keep the hand and the arm going parallel rather than having your arm pointed straight down, which forces them to kind of go to that stop sign Eastern forehand grip. So we kneel down. And we also do it with our left hand if they're non-dominant hand, and we do an Eastern forehand grip with their left hand. Why? Because your two-handed backhand is a left-handed topspin grip, an Eastern forehand to a semi-Western. So we actually do down bounces with our left hand as well to help train that left hand to be more felt and controlled and whatnot. And then we do our catches. So we teach them to
okay, so, but you make sure you bring a towel, because if the court's 130 degrees, then you're going to have some blisters.
Yeah, our summers here are usually 105 to 110. So every kid brings out a towel.
So the court's 140.
Yeah, exactly. So every kid brings out a towel, and when we line up to do our stretches, we also have every kid brings a ball and a towel, and that's why they can do that, the kneeling down. And then the next element, and we do this with our top ranked kids too. It strengthens the hand, it strengthens the wrist, whatever. Then we teach them how to catch a ball on their string. So we teach them to toss the ball, put their racket up, have it fall at the same speed of the ball, and they learn to keep it on the center of their racket face. And they do it on both sides. They can do it on the backhand, and forehand side. And they can toss it from the racket, catch it on the forehand side, toss it, catch it on the backhand side. And that takes a little bit more time, but kids love that. When they start to catch it, and we do a lot of toss and block drills where we teach them to toss it and catch the ball on their strings to, again, take them away from always just hitting a ball, but to interact the racket strings with the ball. And they have to really see the ball to their strings. It just trains the eyes to track the ball better. So those are the three drills that we do: the up bounces, down bounces, and the catches. Mm-hmm. And then our first drill of every day is a toss and block drill where we pair up. And this is where it's kind of fun, because I pair up my number one. If I've got 50 girls, my number one girl goes with a 25. My number two goes with 26, and so on. Now those lower level kids are actually being part of your entire team. They're not being segregated. And this is a great drill because it makes no difference how good you are with one person tossing a ball, the other person volleying it, and that person catching the ball, holding their hand up. So we work on the backhand volley first. We do 20 toss, 20 backhand block volleys, and the tosser steps with their left foot, then holds their hand up after they toss. So the volleyer in the peripheral is not only using that form, but they're also trying to direct the ball to their partner's hand. The player catching the ball is also technically doing a volley, in that they toss the ball, stepping with their left foot, and catching the ball with their hand, which is what we want them to do with a forehand volley, even though they don't even have a racket in their hand. So the toss and block drill is a magical drill that you can elevate the toss and block drill to be anything you want. Half volleys, you can do alternating high volleys, low volleys. Don't tell them what's coming. They have to get back to a ready position. But then after they do 20, they switch places and the other person tosses. And it's a great way to, again, focus on the grip.
Yeah.
You as a coach can, if someone's migrating over to an Eastern grip, you can kind of correct them without having everybody else stop. And that's why every one of my players have no trouble with the Continental grip and hit a very beautiful spin serve, whether it's a slice, a hybrid, or kick.
Okay, so what's the difference between a forehand Continental grip and a backhand Continental grip?
Well, technically none, but I do know that every player will evolve a Continental grip to be subtly different based on the base of the hand, sometimes migrating slightly up or down, depending on if a forehand or a backhand volley. But we know that. We know that every pro doesn't have exactly the same Continental grip on certain shots, but we also know that every player will migrate and what I call evolve the proper grip to be advantageous to them. rather than the opposite, which, okay, I'm going to teach you an Eastern grip now, but we'll change you later. Well, you have to change
Yeah.
if you want to become a good volleyer.
Right.
No, we teach the Continental grip with the understanding that there will be subtle idiosyncrasies and subtle personal flares that hopefully doesn't take away from that. You as a coach have to kind of be conscientious of if it gets too far over and they're migrating too far to an Eastern forehand or Eastern backhand, then you may need to step in and shorten that a little bit. But
Yeah.
usually it's a positive, not a negative.
Yeah, because you know, my own story is that I've had some wrist injuries, and so and you know, I was never a great player, but I at one point I was one of the better 5-0 doubles players in NorCal. My partner and I would make the Grand Prix finals and all that, and I would get compliments on my volleying, but I never ever kept a true, you know, exact right in the middle
Sure.
continental volley. So, you know, I always waited with the forehand continental, and if I had time, then I just roll my wrist just slightly to get the backhand. And if I didn't have time, then I would just hit with the forehand continental grip. You know, and so you know, if in tight situations, you just take maybe the ball a little bit later, and it worked out okay. And you know, some people would say, well, how do you do that? And you know, so you know, and so I think it's good to be open-minded to the fact that some people are going to have a harder time with it. The worst thing I've ever heard of is duct taping somebody's hand to the racket.
Yep.
Okay. No, I was
I agree.
coaching a girl.
I've seen it.
I was coaching a girl who had been traumatized by that. And she could not hit, you know, a really strong continental on both sides. So I got her to shift her backhand grip a little bit. But you know, the trauma of having had a coach tape her hand to the racket like that
Well,
stayed with her. I mean, it's not that's not good coaching in my
no.
opinion.
Well, and there's a lot better solution. I mean, good coaches are always looking for, well, how can I get my student to do this? Now, the way I described earlier with the bounces and the catches always produces the skilled grip. Trust me on that. But if you've got usually it's an adult that learned, they've been playing 20 years with an Eastern forehand, they're doing the windshield wiper move, etc., or they're changing their grip. The easiest way is put a dime in their palm and have them hold a continental. If they're changing their grip, the dime's going to fall out. Same thing on the serve.
Mhm.
If they're changing the grip, I actually had a world-class W or ATP Tour pro that I trained for 5 years, who went to Florida for a year. The stupid pros in Florida did not see that he was changing his grip in the slot down here, and he would come in and he'd hit an Eastern forehand grip, and he comes back to me here in Utah and says, I'm double faulting. And I look at his serve. I says, well, you're changing your grip in mid swing. Nobody saw that in Florida at the academy you were at. I won't mention the name of the academy. And so we got him to shift over. And then, of course, he played Indian Wells and was Kim Kleister's hitting partner when she
Yeah.
became number one in the world. So it does happen even to the best players. Things can change. And so
Yeah.
little things like a coin in the palm, if you got a kid that's changing their grip on either the volley or the serve, put a dime in their palm or in the put on the pad of their finger here, and if they're serving and changing, that dime's going to fall out and they're going to know right away they change their grip.
Yeah. Another one I like is the using a cone to catch the ball, because that's you
Right.
know that helps you kind of line up, you know, things for receiving that ball. And also it also gets, I think it helps players to learn how to receive the ball, and it kind of cuts down on over swinging. Are there any other little kind of like catchy little quick fix things that help with this that you can think of?
Well, there's no quick fix to grip. Grip is the most intimate part of your relationship with your racket. And so again, this is why I just shake my head even at USPTA conventions, and I hear a pro say, teach a player to use Eastern forehand grip and change him later. And I'm like, it's the worst advice you can possibly give. And like Bill said, if you've got a player that simply fails with all the other technique, and you're just, the only way I would teach a player with Eastern grip is if they're going to die in a week and they want to learn, they want to play tennis for a week. And
Wow.
that would be the only time
That's
I would
pretty
say,
morbid, Dave.
well, but I mean,
What
are
no,
you
I'm
going to,
what
you
and what
think your
I'm
player going to
saying
die?
is, I've coached, tens of thousands of players in my life, and I've maybe had 2 or 3 where I just altogether gave up on trying to get them to use Continental, because who knows? I mean, maybe they're just lacking a muscle. Maybe they were born without a muscle that they need to control that motion. I don't know. We can't take them for an MRI like right now to find out what the reason is. And a lot of times it's even a mystery to the parents. I don't know why they can't do that. So yeah, I mean it's pretty rare, but we just have to be open-minded to the fact that that can happen, and that we don't want to traumatize somebody over it.
Well,
Um,
I'll always say, did you try the method I explained earlier with the bounces and the catches and the thing like that? Because if you're not, to assume a kid can't do something because they can't do it today or even a week from today, and you're not giving them the tools in which to override or to
yeah,
train the muscle memory, then sure. I mean, you're going to have to resort to saying, I give up. I'm going to have to let you do this, this, and this. And
yeah,
again, 4,800 players later, I've never had a player not be able to use a continental grip on the server volley.
yeah.
So, I mean, I get what you're saying, Bill, and certainly I don't disagree that we've got to be flexible in our mindset that if a player does come across and given all the tools that you've given them, and
Right.
if you're a very good pro with a lot of tools in your toolbox, then you may have to literally let them enjoy
Well, Scouts honor. I did
it.
my best. All
There you go.
right.
I know you did.
So, no, because this, I mean, like we went through a couple of hours of training and trying different things and intervening and everything, and so yeah, all tools were exhausted there. So,
Yep. Got it.
um, so now now that they're have learning the technique, what does it look like when they're first using it?
Well, the progression, again, a lot of coaches do the ultimate failure. They get kids into a live ball setting as soon as they can. Well, kids will always go back to what they perceive will get the ball to a target, or in a rally situation, they're going to dink, they're going to push, they're going to revert back to grip. So the worst thing you can do is get a kid into a live ball setting prematurely. So the progression that we use is, notice that we did the up bounces in a very controlled environment, down bounces, the catches, and these are things that kids can do at home. Again, you were mentioning, I spent 3 or 4 hours with this kid. Yeah, but you know what? Is the kid doing it at home to help facilitate the production of gaining control and competence of that grip? So
Mhm.
now the next step is, okay, the toss and block. Now we're hitting a ball that's coming to us, but in a very controlled environment, because now if they take a swing or they convert back, they're going to hit it too flat, they're going to hit it
Right.
too hard, et cetera, et cetera. So the toss and block drill. Then the next step is a live ball partner drill where they're very close to the net, just blocking the ball vertically, not horizontally. A lot of coaches train players to hit horizontal by tossing balls and having them hit to a target that's way back here in the back part of the court. So they're naturally going to swing harder because there's a perception that I've got to hit it harder to get it back there, and they don't. And
Yeah.
the toss and block drill usually teaches that. So the first drill that we actually, if we're going to move into a pro-fed drill, would be an angle volley. Because again, the angle volley promotes reflecting a ball on a severe angle, which is actually almost as deep as hitting a ball deep if you're going from one alley to the other in terms of a sharp angle. But they don't have that perception of hitting the ball one dimensionally, which is straight ahead. And number two, they're learning to use the reflection of the racket angle and setting the angle early to get the angle. I always use the analogy, imagine your racket is a mirror. The ball coming is a beam of light. Would you swing at the beam of light with your mirror to make it go, to angle the reflection somewhere? And every kid's, of course, no, because I would just put the mirror at an angle behind the light and I said, there you go. You just learned to volley. And so they start to learn that they get plenty of power. They get plenty, and the slicing action, getting a little underspin is absolutely critical. If you're hitting a ball flat, how many times have we seen a player literally a foot off the net, a ball head high, and they bury it in the bottom of the net because they hit the ball flat, the angle of reflection downward is equal to the incident angle, and they're always going to reflect down, and now they're hitting down on top of it. They're going to bury the ball in the bottom of the net, even though it seems to defy all the known laws of physics. So the slicing action is critical because as you get better, you're going to hit lower balls that have to be angled upward. And if you hit a ball flat upward, you're going to hit it out. So how do we change the velocity of a volley? We change it to spin. So the lower the volley, you'll see all top players have a nice cut, a nice slice, not a chop, but a nice slice to slow the velocity down so I can still firm it up. I don't have to dink it. That's the biggest thing. When players hit flat, I say this at every workshop. You want to produce dinkers? Teach them to hit flat.
Yeah.
It's now called gravity-reliant tennis. You hit the ball hard enough to clear the net, soft enough that gravity brings the ball down. There you go. Now you have a dinker for life.
Well, one thing I love is that extremely disappointed look in the opponent when you've hit enough slice on the ball that sort of just like skids on the ground and it doesn't come up for them, and then they have to go dig that ball up, right? So because the less spin, underspin you have on that ball, the more it's gonna pop up for someone to come forward and pass you. So
and you want to know what shot all my kids can hit very well? Drop shots. Because once they learn, instead of hitting the back of the ball on the volley, they're slicing the same technique, exact same technique, under the ball to get the drop shot. So you get the butterfly falling straight down and not moving as far forward. So that's another advantage to beyond. And I would get in arguments with a very famous pro who's passed away. I won't mention his name, but nice guy. But he would teach flat volleys. It's simple. And he would teach changing the grip. And I'm like, well, not first and foremost, you're teaching players to become dinkers, because to hit a ball flat, you cannot overhit a ball. It's going to give you too much power, and you get these players that hitting balls hitting the back fence or in the bottom of the net. So
well, and further on that, the one of the worst volley tips is punch the volley. So punch the volley, and Continental grips with nice slice are completely opposite, antithetical ideas. So absolutely do not punch the volley. In fact, what the phrase I like is touch stop. So when you go to that ball and you make contact, and then you're stopping your racket on the ball, a lot of energy transfers onto the ball. People swing through their volleys too much, and you can only really do that really well with a Continental grip.
Well, if you've read my books, you guys all know my favorite phrases. One is dealing with the volley. It's called set and hold. So if a ball is coming to me, I set my racket angle to whatever target I want. I hit the ball and I hold the finish. If I hit the ball anywhere within that contact zone, the ball is going to go where I'm aiming. Now, if I take too big of a backswing and I come around and follow through, now my timing has to be impeccable. So like you said, Bill, you're saying stop, which I say hold your finish. Because if I can hold my finish and check my strings to see that they're still facing the target, it's going to hit the target, or it's going to be unless they frame it. So that idea of setting and holding allows players to realize that I don't need to follow through. I'm just polluting the swing when I follow through. So make sure you set, hold. And if you watch, I'm watching the Indian Wells matches going on, and I love the replays of watching. I was watching Taylor Fritz play yesterday when he lost a tough match to Holger Rune, and the replays of the volleys were fabulous. And Taylor comes in, drives the ball, holds his finish.
Yeah. Yeah.
Textbook.
Well, he's made that a point of emphasis. He didn't always play that way. So that's something you're going to see more growth in. But yeah, I want to challenge people to try this. Go and volley and go to the ball and stop right on the ball and watch that ball go like that. It's kind of like it's like those metal what's it called? Newton's cradle, right? Where you drop the metal ball and it hits the other one, then the energy transfers.
Right.
So my computer is telling me that it's going to die any moment now. So we need to wrap this up pretty quick. But so now, if you had to summarize really quick, like in 4 or 5 steps or whatever, the progression of teaching Continental grips, how would you do that in very succinct?
Well, I've already covered it. I've covered it exactly what we talked about. I will add the last key element, and that is teaching players to reach with their feet, not with their hand. So a lot of players will stop and lean forward, lose their spine angle, and reach for the volley, and that always pollutes the show. So we do it with the final step is toss balls to the left and right, and having a player move their feet, and then their racket is in exactly the same angle as if they were standing there the whole time. So reach with your feet, not with your hands, would be that next mindset of a great volley.
I like to say transport the racket to the ball with your feet.
Sure. If you want to make it a little more complex, reach with your feet. Reach with your feet.
No, I mean it's more words, but I think it's a little more precise, because the racket's going to be relatively still. You want to get over there with your feet to go put the racket on the ball.
Love that. Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you again, Dave. And hey, if you're out there watching and you have more questions, so this was a comment that somebody made on one of our videos. Can you get Dave to explain how he teaches the Continental thing? So we came through for somebody today. And so if you have a question or a comment about something you want us to cover, go ahead and put that in there. I'll take a look at those later. But
I think your computer is dying, Bill.
Yep, that's the announcement that my computer.
Well, since we're losing your voice, so I'll say this: everyone
is dying. So
send us a note.
All right. So thanks, Dave, and we'll see you again next time.
Perfect. Thanks, Bill. Take care, everybody.